All right. I see folks are rolling in. I'm sure there will be several others coming in over the next couple minutes. But welcome to everyone who is here. My name is Tyler Steven. I am the technical program manager at Current, one of the organizations behind this Third Coast Water Seminar series. Um, Today we will be hearing from Dr. Jason He, who will be talking about treatment of wastewater sludge for nutrient recovery. Um, so yeah, let's get into it. So a little bit of background, as I mentioned, I am from Current, um, which is the anchor organization behind a NSF-backed innovation engine called Great Lakes Renew. And the kind of ethos behind the Third Coast Water Seminar series is this concept of transforming waste into wealth, which is aligned with the Great Lakes Renew priorities. So looking at who is Current, what we are, and why we care. So Current is a nonprofit water innovation hub based right here in Chicago. Um, Founded in 2016, so this is our 10th year, 10th revolution around the sun. And we have three sort of goals. The first is to grow the circular blue economy. The second is to accelerate water innovation. And the third is to solve pressing water challenges by convening, connecting, and supporting a broad ecosystem of partners, including researchers, innovators, workforce development, and more. So as mentioned, Current is the anchor organization behind the NSF-backed Great Lakes Renew Innovation Engine. So this is an up to $160 million per year award from the NSF, $160 million over 10 years award for the NSF. And it's focused on the recovery of energy, nutrients, critical elements, and water from what is historically considered waste streams. So Great Lakes Renew has a couple key objectives. So the first is to spur the circular economy transition, um, to support the invention and commercialization of selective separation technologies, and to attract and retain water-intensive industries into the Great Lakes region, which is inclusive of 6 states around the Great Lakes, including Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. So one of the arms that Great Lakes Renew and Current uses to support this recovery of critical materials is supporting research and development projects. So here are just some of the examples of amazing projects that we are currently funding throughout the Great Lakes region, from PFAS detection to critical minerals extraction to AI optimized wet weather treatment. If you want to learn more, we could talk about this all day, but we do want to transition over to our speaker. So if you do want to learn more, you can scan that QR code, which will take you to Current's website. You can also connect with us on socials, and subscribe to our newsletter. Um, and without further ado, I will pass it off to one of our partners, Dr. Sorian Che, who will introduce our speaker. And just to give everyone an awareness of how the structure will work, we will have about 45 minutes presentation from Dr. Jason He, and then we will have about 10 minutes for questions and answers and discussion. So feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A box while we are presenting. So I'll pass it off to you, Sorian.
Thank you, Tyler. So, hello, everyone. My name is Sorin Ryan at the University of Cincinnati. This is my great pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Jason He. He is the current Laura and William James Professor and Associate Chair of the Department of Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering at Washington University in St. Louis. Prior to joining this university, he was professor at Virginia Tech, and he received a PhD from what she was returned to the home institution. And he published more than 280 journal papers and received several national and international awards. And he's serving as editor in hazardous materials and also water environmental research. Also, he was named as fellow of IWA, International Water Association, and also Water Environmental Federation. We did that. So now I'm pass over my microphone to Dr. Ha. Please, stage is yours.
Okay, let me share my screen first, where one can. All right, and let me get the laser point out. So, uh, I hope everyone can hear me and can see the screen. So, thank you, So Young, for the nice introduction. I also appreciate the invitation from Current to join this seminar series. It's my great pleasure today to share some of our work. Let me see. All right. So today I'm going to talk about the electrochemical treatment of wastewater sludge for nutrient recovery and enhance the dewatability. This seminar series is about water. Why we talk about sludge? And many of you in the field, you understand that sludge is very important of the wastewater. I would like to start my talk with a quote from a legendary researcher, Dr. Perry McCarthy. I was fortunate to meet with him more than 10 years ago when I was in Milwaukee as a faculty member. He was invited keynote speaker for NRB Digestion short course organized by Marquette University. By the way, that was an excellent short course. So during the breakfast, we chat about sludge, it's NRB digestion, and he said, wastewater sludge, 50% effort to treat it, but 90% headache. So it's a traditional old topic, still with a lot of problem, but also present a lot of challenges. So that's why today's talk is focused on the sludge. Just in case some of the audience not familiar with, I assume most of you know it, just in case. Wastewater sludge, we talk about sludge, actually 98, 99% of sludge is still water. So in a municipal wastewater treatment process, we have two types of sludge. Primary sludge, that's the large particles, mostly organic materials, other contaminants precipitate in the primary clarify and become primary sludge. And we have secondary sludge. We have different term called waste active sludge, or WAS. That's a group of microorganisms we use to treat wastewater, but they grow too much. Then we have to discharge some of them. So we have two type of sludge. There are different ways to treat this sludge, and I talk about one of the most popular is the anaerobic digestion, right? So it's idea-wise, it's 1,000 years old, very mature technology. It can greatly help reduce the solid contents with the byproducts of biogas. That's a source of renewable energy. Depends on the area and the flavor of the operator. Sometimes people just only treat the primary sludge because it's really good substrate. The headache probably mostly from secondary sludge because you try to use one group of microorganism to eat the other group of microorganism as a substrate. It's a bit challenging. You might want to do a little bit more pre-treatment. Anyway, so after sludge treatment, you still get like 98, 99% of the water in that sludge. So next we do the dewatering, remove water, reduce the water contents to depend the approach of the dewater process to 70, 80% of the water. So you create a certain kind of a solids, then send away, right? Send away for further disposal. So that's the overall process of the wastewater sludge generation and the treatment. So there are definitely a lot of variables. Um, what do we call wastewater treatment plant? It's a wastewater treatment plant, right? But in recent year, probably like the past 2 or 3 decades, more and more treatment plants started to put a new name of water resource recovery facility, so WRF. So that's really a change of the mindset. Let's look at waste as a resource. So I copy this figure from this paper, basically show what type of major resource we can recover from wastewater, treated water, nutrient, biosolid, biogas. When you look at this, actually 3 out of 4 type of majorly recovered resource actually from sludge. So only, I mean, treated water, you have like advanced treatment for direct or indirect potable reuse, aquifer recharge, that's from the mainstream process. But nutrient, when we look at the nitrogen, phosphorus, it probably won't make too much sense to recover from mainstream at this point. Mainstream wastewater because of low concentration, right? Phosphate like 5 to 10 milligram per liter, sometimes even lower. Ammonia nitrogen like 30 to 50 milligram per liter on average. It's just too low to have a meaningful recovery. But when you have like a side stream, that's like think about the treatment process I just mentioned. You have 80 anaerobic digester, treat the sludge, and after that you do the dewatering. So we only show the solid part you haul away, but you still have liquid that reject the water, contains the concentrated, at least 10 times higher the concentration for both nitrogen and phosphorus. Then it makes some sense to do the recovery. Okay. So I'm not going to a lot of details for biosolids, biogas, because those are very mature. So I'm going to focus on the nutrient recovery using electrochemical method here. Well, I mentioned there's like two types of nutrient, nitrogen and the phosphorus. The bigger interest actually is in the phosphorus. It's not saying like nitrogen is not important. It's just think about the surrounding you, the almost 80% of the air is nitrogen. If we got really the cheap source of energy, you can always get ammonia, right? Because that's, although at this point, like 1 to 2% of water electricity used to synthesize ammonia, very energy intensive for sure, but you get the nitrogen available. Phosphorus on the other side is a different story. The only source you get of phosphorus is from mining. So there's a limited storage, right? So there's different sources to talk about. We have 100 years or 200 years or 50 years storage. But anyway, there's a limited, right? So in the nature, it takes millions years for those phosphorus compounds to form phosphate rock. But in the society, it only takes like tens of years. So we get those phosphorus from mining process and put into the food production. We consume it and release to the environment. And if we want to collect those phosphorus compounds back to phosphorus rock, it's millions a year. Literally not renewable for us, right? So then it makes some sense if we can get a shortcut to recover this phosphorus from the waste and reduce the whole process. Wastewater treatment plant or wastewater resource recovery facility actually is a major source of the phosphate waste. So this is a graph cited from this paper in the Stoughton. It's 10 years old, but still valid, showing the major source of the phosphate waste. The blue is also is the wastewater related source. Okay. And the green is like food waste. You get the pet waste and the deceased pet human will all contribute to that waste. But look at those blue ones. Look at those blue ones. So the sludge is dominantly the source of the phosphate waste, right? So other than effluent, the aqueous part of sludge is a very major source. So, and what do we do with the sludge? Let's see. This data is from EPA, fairly recent, the 2024. Almost 60% land application. A quarter of the sludge landfill. 14% incineration. So we talk about sludge ash, that's another treatment. Then there's a 2% of others. So 60%, one may ask, what's wrong with that land application? We can use that as a fertilizer, which is true, right? So we got, depends on the treatment process, you got class A, class B sludge. Some can be used as fertilizer, some just for the land application. People are already doing that, practice that for years. And why do we have to recover something of this sludge? Can we just use the treated sludge biosolids directly? Well, things are changing, right? So, I mean, there's always new things coming. And for environmental engineers, we don't want too many new things, especially contaminants, but unfortunately there are. And one of the most the attended the contaminant in recent years obviously is the PFAS. So I just cite those, copy those news, and Maine has become the first state to ban the sludge application, land application. There are other states discussing and also may follow up. So there are challenges to apply those biosolids to land. So now we look at the issue that we have sludge. It's rich in nutrient. We can do something to recover it. And on the other side, we're facing increasing challenge to apply them directly as fertilizer or even land application. What are we going to do? Can we come up with something to extract still valuable stuff out of this sludge as a part of its treatment? Because you have to do the treatment anyway. So even landfill, they're reluctant to receive sludge. Well, recover phosphorus from wastewater from sludge, again, nothing new, right? So there have been many technologies, many companies developing various technologies. So I'm citing the data from review paper. Depends on the feedstock. You have the effluent processed water, that's rejected water from dewatering. You have the sewage sludge and the sludge ash after incineration. So there's many different products developed to recover phosphate. When you try to recover something from waste, the biggest challenge is the cost, obviously, right? So you have another source, alternative source from mining. That's always cheaper. So you try to recover something, resource recover from waste is always cost. I cite this graph from Stoughton, a publication. Look at this line that's I won't say it's a benchmark because that's the cost from phosphate rock. It's really hard to beat it. Um, when you have the different feedstock, let's say the sludge ash, it can be relatively cheaper, but because you consider that sludge has been incinerated, water is gone, and a lot of other compounds, organics probably also gone, then you have really highly concentrated phosphate available for recovery. Then the overall cost can be reduced. The challenge is really the sewage sludge. Sewage sludge, overall, those blue dots, a lot more expensive. I don't know what happened with these green dots. I mean, aqueous phase is supposed to be here, but there's always outliner. So, but in general, when you look at the phosphate recovery from sludge, sewage sludge, it's more expensive, right? So if there's a approach overall reduce the cost, that can make this recover more economic competitive. So how do we recover the phosphate from sludge? And we have technology like Struvite recover from aqueous phase. But think about this, in the rejected water, your phosphate concentration is like 70, 80, 50 to 70 or 80 milligram per liter. There's a lot more phosphate in the solid phase, right? So if we add acid, we have like a chemical leaching process. And that concentration can be increased to 250, 300, 350, depend on waste, but it's several times of the concentration in the aqueous part. So that's really helped the downstream recovery process. So this can be done by wet chemistry process. You add acid leaching, release that. Then to recover it, it's the same old story precipitation for phosphate. Okay. So it works. Then why do we need a new process? And there are always issue with you have to add chemicals, and there's a safety issue. There's a lot of our researchers, we don't really consider that. So because in the lab, we just ask our graduate student to transfer acid, use a pipette. What's wrong with that? But in reality, operators have to deal with the acid, strong base compounds, storage, transport. There's a lot of other issues involved. There's other further disposal and environmental impact when you generate such solutions. So can we have approach that we don't have to store the acid, store those dangerous chemicals? When we need it, we generate. When we don't need it, we don't have to produce it or store it. So here comes electrochemical process. So electrochemical process, if you understand the battery fuel cell, I'm sure most of you understand that. It's pretty straightforward. We have anode and a cathode, and in the anode is oxidation process. The cathode is reduction process. So anode is going to produce proton. That means acidification, low pH acid. And the cathode is going to have a high pH, OH minus. So they create two different pH environment. And we need to think about what we're going to do. Can we take advantage of that? Oh yeah, low pH leaching, right? So that's the acidification. We can leach the phosphate out of the sludge. And high pH precipitation, because the struvite or other way you want to precipitate the phosphate, typically you have to elevate the pH, increase the pH. So we have these two different pH environment created by the same electricity. Because for electrochemical reaction, the electron is going to move from one electrode to the other electrode. So the same electron transfer process generate two different pH environment. Then let's do something with that pH environment. So a few years ago, we did a literature review. So look at what people already done, right? So certainly we're not the first. There's already a amount of the work in this field. So we wrote this review paper, look at the different wastewater sludge feedstock. There's a WAS, waste active sludge, digested, just out of the anaerobic digester. Chemically enhanced sludge, there's chemically enhanced phosphate removal process, and the sludge ash after incineration. For the leaching process, that's where I'm going to focus on today. Is there general three approach, electrobio. I'm going to a little bit more details next slides, anode releasing and cathode phosphorus releasing. For recovery process, I'm not going to a lot of details. In general, for recovery, you need to have a two-step. One is a separation, right? You get them leached into the aqueous phase. You want to separate from other compounds that you don't want, then precipitation. So in general, those two processes involved. So as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on really the releasing, the leaching part. The first method that people already studied is called electrochemical plus bio. Not very popular. not very popular. So basically, they use electrochemical to destroy something and use a bio either to further destroy a compound, release the phosphate, or create a microenvironment for the low pH, release a phosphate. Not very popular. The second one in the middle, that's the anode phosphorus releasing, the anode leaching. This is very popular. I'm going to show you the data. Actually, the high pH can also leach phosphate. You would think only low pH acidification, but high pH can also leach phosphate. So we analyze the literature data. On the X, you can see the number of the study by the time we published this paper. And the most study is anode leaching. Right, so a few study about electrobio, a few study about the cathodic, and the leaching rate. So usually the anode cathode pure electrochemical system will be better than the bio system. Okay. So we also analyze further data. So a lot of data, I'm not going to a lot of detail, just look at the first graph that show the sludge phosphate content. Obviously, the SSA, which is a sludge ash, has the highest. Yeah, you can understand that the water is gone, a lot of other compounds gone, so you get a high content of phosphate. That's really makes the downstream recover a lot easier. And another thing I want to get your attention to is this graph. So ignore the other three graphs. So this graph is kind of there looks like there's a preference, right? So obviously there's more studies about the anode leaching, but there also kind of a preference to look at the anode leaching that works better for multiple substrate. So then we come to our own study. Okay, so the first reactor we developed is something like electrodialysis. If you work on the desalination, you'll understand the ED process. But this is a really simplified ED process with only one membrane pair. So we have the anode, cathode, and we have CEM, that's the cation exchange membrane, and AEM, that's anion exchange membrane. So how this system is operated, we feed the whole digestate. So that's basically digested sludge. Okay. So after AD, we still feel AD is a very good technology. So we try to look at what we're going to do with the AD digested sludge. So into the anode, that's the acidification happening where the phosphate is leached. Okay. Then we go through this dewatering. Right. We go through remove the water, remove the solid part and return that to the aqueous phase, which contains increased phosphate into the cathode. Because of the AEM, the anion, the negative charged ion, is moving from cathode into the middle chamber we call recover chamber. Okay, again, it's the same electrons driving this whole process. And we have something negative moving to the center chamber. That means you should have something positive moving from anode into the recover chamber, which is ammonia. I'm going to show you the data. Okay. Then we have this recover chamber with concentrated nutrient, including both ammonia and the phosphate. Then we go through the further recovery, which is a precipitation. There's not too much fancy story over there. So first of all, we made a comparison. How does this process work just compared to acid leaching? You already have acid leaching. Despite those potential problems, it still works well. Okay, so we add the hydrochloric acid. The pink is the raw sludge. So the pink column is raw sludge without any treatment. The green color is the acid treatment, so wet chemistry. And the blue one is the ENRC, electrochemical nutrient recovery cells. We have different terms. So later we may have the electrical phosphorus recover cells. But this is electrochemical treatment, the anode after the treatment, okay? So first of all, let's look at the phosphate because that's where our interest is. So between the green, that's the acid treatment, and the electrochemical treatment, quite similar. So that means the electrochemical acidification can achieve similar performance as the acid just by adding the hydrochloric strong acid. And there's very little phosphate. Of course, this scale is pretty large, right? So the phosphate concentration is usually low. So there's much lower phosphate concentration in the raw sludge. So you do have to go through the leaching. Otherwise, the aqueous contains a limited amount of phosphate. And the other thing I want you to look at is this ammonia, nitrogen, because that's the other important nutrient. Is raw sludge does contains a lot of ammonia, right? A few thousand, over 1,000 milligram per liter. And acid treatment also around a similar concentration, similar level, almost no, extremely low concentration in the electrochemical treatment. That is because what I just mentioned, there is a cation movement. When the electricity is applied, the oxidation happening, electrons left, then you have something positive left. So that's ammonia. Ammonia move from anode into the recovery chamber. So this This cell actually recover both nitrogen and the phosphate. We just focus on phosphate, but nitrogen is recovered at the same time. Okay. And CO3 in the raw sludge, because I mean AD usually contains high alkalinity, you do have that. That's actually become quite a bit challenging when you try to bring down the pH because they're gonna consume protons first. So anyway, so this comparison shows that the electrochemical process works. We can release the phosphate. We actually also get rid of the ammonia. Not really get rid of, we also recover ammonia. We also remove a certain of the cations. When you look at the calcium, a lot of calcium here, and potassium, magnesium, but in the electrochemical system, not too much cations in the anode effluent because they also moved. So that's actually quite important to another issue that I'm going to talk at the end of the today is the dewatability. I'll get back to that after a few slides. So we show the repeated performance when you apply electricity. Those are the batch reaction. The blue ones recover. So you can see it's repeated performance. Okay, the concentration can get to like 3 to 400 milligram per liter. And this is the ammonia, as I mentioned. At the same time, we do get a recover of ammonia to over 3,000 milligram per liter. It's like a byproduct at the same time. So it works. It works. And we did mass balance, try to understand what's going on inside the system. You have to do a mass balance. We can get about 73% of phosphate in the recovered solution. That's the middle chamber, okay? And we have about 7% stay in that chamber, don't want to come out. So there could be precipitation. And we have about 10% in the cathode chamber. Remember, the cathode chamber, the pH is increased. There will be scaling, the precipitation. And we have another 10% which have no idea where they got. Okay, so when students are doing experiment, they take sample like 1 milliliter, 2 milliliter from cathode for analyze, so some phosphate is lost. So overall, we get about 73% recoverable phosphate. And then we'll precipitate those phosphate into the solid and further analyze the solid. And the phosphorus concentration is about 14 to 15%, similar to the rock. Because you want to look at when you recover the phosphate from wastewater sludge, you probably don't really apply them as fertilizer directly. Even sometimes it's true white. It's a really nice product recovered. And a lot of times they're still used as a feedstock for fertilizer production. So for fertilizer factory, they really just look at the percentage of phosphorus in the feedstock. So the recovered solids, very comparable. Okay. And the heavy metal, that's another concern. So we look at the heavy metal, especially lead, 0.02%. The EPA regulation is 0.03%. So we can possibly reduce the contents of heavy metal and make it to meet the EPA requirement. So during the mass balance, it says about 10% of phosphate just stuck in the cathode. Okay, so they don't come out because of the precipitation scaling. That intrigued us to think about why don't we just recover them in the cathode, let all of them precipitate? Because for any wastewater treatment process or reactor, the simpler the better. The electrochemical system is complicated. You have anode, cathode, you have a membrane, and a three chamber, now mentioned. So that's complicated. That always means complicated operation and more expensive, right? More cost. So what if we just let them precipitate in the cathode and use the weak acid to wash them out? So, I mean, after some time, so not like after every batch. So we did experiment, so simplify the reactor, and we can precipitate almost all of them. 98% of the phosphate precipitate in the cathode. And that's affected by how fast they precipitate is affected by the current. So when you apply different amount of current, that means how fast the reaction going to be. So the precipitation rate will be different. But eventually, even at the low current, they can get 98% precipitation, right? The shorter the time, the shorter the retention time, then the smaller the reactor we can have. Again, it's come back to the cost related. And very, very busy graph data, so you don't have to look into details. So the main conclusion here is around 70-80% of phosphorus in the whole digestate, not just aqueous phase, can be harvested in this way. So previously in the three chamber, we got 73%. Here is 78, close to 80%. So recover efficiency kind of similar, right? So it's a little bit higher, but reactor structure wise, it's a lot simpler. Okay. Again, it's really to the cost. And we have extended operation for a reactor. You want to see how stable a reaction operation is. And for the figure in the top, on top, that's the energy. We actually use the energy as indicator. Should we do something cleaning? All right. So here, the dashed red line light show the benchmark, the kind of a new castle electrode because the precipitation happening in the castle. They're gonna start to scale forward the castle electrode. So if the energy consumption is around this dash line, fine, let's keep running. Let's keep running and build up this precipitation. Once it's go up much higher, then we need to do some cleaning. So you can see those higher peak for the blue one, that's a higher energy consumption, means that we do have to do periodical cleaning and maintenance, which is normal for any like membrane-based process, right? And the phosphate concentration in the cathode is around 200 to 300 milligram per liter. It's a very stable performance over a long period of time operation. The cost. So the energy consumption, I mean, the energy consumption also relates to the cost. So this is the comparison between our study and the literature. So if you look at the red zone, so that's basically the lower recovery rate, higher the cost, that's the least favor, right? So we want to go to the gray zone, this corner. So the higher recovery rate and the lower the energy consumption. So, and here's where our study are compared to the literature published before our study. So we can possibly bring down the energy consumption. But where's the benchmark? Even it's a benchmark, so get phosphate from the rock is around here. Okay, it's around here. It's hard to beat them. It's hard to beat them. We have to admit. So how can we make this technology more sustainable or more competitive? Um, I'm going to talk about that later. Is co-benefit. So recover one item probably not enough to make it competitive. If there are co-benefits, we can possibly bring down the overall cost. So before I talk about that co-benefit, I want to see that because the value of recovered product largely relate to two factors, concentration and purity. The higher the concentration, better. Pure, the better. So that's the value. So we did an experiment to look at how high the concentration we can get for phosphate after the multiple cycle of the operation. So in this graph A, you can see that that's blue dot, that's the phosphate concentration can get to over 4,000 milligram per liter. So again, the higher concentration, that's much higher than like 2 or 300, but this is from multiple cycle operations. We just build up, accumulate, okay? Can we go even higher? Not really, because at a higher concentration, the higher concentration, you build up kind of resistance. So the additional phosphate cannot move across the membrane because you have a much higher concentration on the other side, they create a strong resistance. So there's a certain point, okay, now it's time to harvest. All right, so it's harvest, then let's reduce concentration for another round of multiple batch accumulation. At the same time, ammonia strip, we can get like 3 to 4,000 as a byproduct. And when we precipitate those recovered products at that concentration, we make a comparison to just ADS, that's the AD sludge after acid leaching. Okay, we make comparison, but without going through electrochemical treatment and separation or further recovery. It's still the sludge. We can leach the phosphate out just by adding acid. It's pretty good amount of phosphate. Then let's do the precipitate. Okay. First of all, the appearance definitely different. So you can see the electrochemical treatment. This is what we call EPRS, electrochemical phosphorus recovery system, but it's just different term, similar system. Okay. It looks much better. It's a white color, it's pure, and ADS filtrate after the precipitation, it's still everything's there. Then when you analyze the element, the dry weight, the blue light, that's the electrochemical treated recovery, contains like 24-25% phosphate, dry weight. And for that sludge without electrochemical treatment, around 15%, right? We also got a lot of magnesium, and we reduce other cations. Heavy metals. So that's the figure in the bottom. So the blue one, we almost have no cadmium and very low concentration chromium compared to the sludge without electrochemical treatment. And the lead, we have much lower concentration. Not sure why we have a little bit higher arsenic, but for the majority of the heavy metal, we can greatly reduce their concentration. So make your final product more attractive. And we also test the bacteria, the coliform, because the class A, class B sludge major indicator is the coliform. So after electrochemical treatment, you have strong acid, greatly reduce coliform. So make because eventually after recovery, you still get a solid. You still go through the dewatering, you still get solid. You still need to have the further disposal. So it's a class A sludge. So the coliform can be much lower. All right, so how do we get to the dewatering? I spend most of today's time talking about the nutrient recovery. How do we get the dewatering? Okay. So that's what happened in during the lab research is, okay, after the students work on electrochemical treatment, recover nutrient, we got really interesting data. We publish all happy. Now we come down to think about, we still get a bunch of solids. What are we going to do? That's still the sludge. You should go through dewatering and further dispose. So I asked my students, can we do some further tests? See what this electrochemical treatment have the effect on. There could be other. I mean, we discovered a disinfection effect. That's the bonus effect, co-benefit. Is there something else? So we test the dewatering here, and the parameter we didn't use a CST, but we're not use a CST. That's a common parameter for the dewatering. We use SRF. That's another parameter, specific resistance to filtration. Just in general, the lower the better. Okay. So we look at the different sludge. That's the AD sludge. There's a primary solid sludge and the thickened was and the raw solids. And those blue, light blue, the column, that's the electrochemical treatment. It's all reduced. It's all reduced. That's very exciting. So you get one electrochemical treatment, you recover the phosphate, you do the disinfection, and you have improved dewatability, right? And we further look into we change the electricity, the current. So without any electricity, still put into the same cell, no change for the SRF. So dewatability is no change. But when we increase the current from 10 amp per square meter, 20, 40, it's decreased a lot. Decreased a lot. So that's very significant improvement of the dewatability. Of course, the SRF doesn't directly translate to how much water you squeeze out. You still need to go through depends on the process, the belt pressing or centrifuge to give you exact data on how much water you can get out. But SRF or CST, those parameters used to define the dewatability, it still can give you an indication actually dewatability improved after this electrochemical treatment. But why? Why is it improved? I mean, that's always the question as a researcher, we try to understand reason. What's the mechanism behind that? So we had some initial hypothesis. This is a very busy graph. I'll guide you slowly. So we have some hypothesis. What are potential factors that contribute to dewatability and happening in our system? So we can think of three. Acidification. Anode pH decrease. There's acidification involved. Electrooxidation. You get an electrode. So things can happen. You can probably produce some hydroxide radical or other radical that start to oxidize the organic compound. We have cation removal. Remember the data, we have ammonia removal, we have those calcium, magnesium, potassium, those cation also removed through this cation exchange membrane. So we have three factors. Which one contribute? We don't know. So they may all contribute, but to try to understand their role, we create an experiment. Looks like we try to have experiment that contains only one or two factors. For instance, EPRC, that's electrochemical phosphorus recovery cell. It's the same electrochemical system we have all three factors. And then we have acid acidification, just add acid. So that's only the first one. There's no electrochemical oxidation. There's no cation removal. And then we have the buffer. So try to minimize the acidification effect. But we do have electrochemical oxidation and cation removal. Okay. And we have those, the other two cells, we use a different membrane. In most membrane, we have CEM. That's the cation exchange membrane. And for this one, we have AEM, anion exchange membrane. That means cation will not move across membrane. Those cations gonna still stay in the anode, but anion is gonna move. Okay, but that's different story. We just look at whether cation are gonna move. So we still have acidification, and we have electrooxidation, but we don't have cation removal, and we have a manual cation removal. So this test was done in a different lab, in Dr. Matt Higgins' lab at the Bucknell University. So that's a separate independent test. Just look at there's a series of the experiment to remove the cation. But there's acidification, there's cation removal without the electrochemical reaction. All right, so we have tried to think about as many tests as possible to identify which factor is working. So here's the data. So this is the RSF raw sludge without any treatment. All right. This is electrochemical treatment, much lower. So we prove it works. It's reducing the SRF. That means it's improving the sludge dewatability. And when we have those anion exchange membrane or nylon membrane, which either gonna remove cations, it doesn't work. All right. So it's reduced a little bit, probably not significantly different. And I remember, and when we have the buffered pre-as this AN and A, that's a pre-acidified the system, it doesn't work. So they do have the cation removal, okay, but no acidification. And when we have manual cation removal with acidification, it works, but not as well as electrochemical system. All right, so what's our conclusion? So all three factors contribute. So acidification is important, but cation remove actually quite important. You see, when we have a cation remove, they can contribute, but neither can just work alone, right? So a single factor will not work alone to improve the dewatability. So do we fully understand it? Not really. All right. So those are just we have the data to prove certain factor, but we don't really have the data to understand every mechanism. But we have a hypothesis. It's not a proven. It's unproven hypothesis. Potential mechanism involving this enhanced dewatability. Okay. So the stuff I'm going to talk about is I don't have a strong data. So we have the data to prove some phenomena, but not everything. So we have the original solid flux. A lot of flux, there's negative charge. So we do have a cation inside to balance the charge. When we have acid, that's the leaching acidification, they start to release the cation, but the cation is still in the solution. They just released from the flux, and that helps the flux start to bond each other because you remove some kind of because the cation function as a bridge or connector. So you remove some of them, and then some flux can start to aggregate, become larger one. So that's release the water, bond the water. You have a free water, you have a bound water. Okay, that's enhance the dewatability, but those cations are still there. All right. So the effect is not maximized. Then when we have acidified electrochemical treatment, we thought there might be some electrochemical oxidation that contribute to this because their electrochemical oxidation breakdown like EPS or other compounds really start to affect the structure of the sludge and help release the bound water. Then we have this everything together. Cation is gone. So compared to B, so you look at the D compared to B simple acidification, cation still there, right? And the D, the cation is removed. Then that bonding, that bridge is completely gone. The connector is completely gone. Then those particles, I mean, sludge flux can really start to aggregate and achieve the maximize the dewatability. Again, this is unproven hypothesis. We don't know whether it's true and the percentage of each factor contribute to the overall dewatability. We don't know yet, but at least based on some initial data we got and help us to guide the further research. We're actually continuing the research in this area, and we're pretty excited to see this phenomenon. All right, I think around the time to conclude. Some perspective. So electrochemical sludge treatment still in its early stage. There are kind of full scale like electroosmosis help with the dewatability, but when you look at the treatment, really break down the sludge and extract something from the sludge, we're still at a pretty early stage. Just recover something alone from the sludge probably won't make it cost competitive, right? So we have to look at like a co-benefit, for instance, the dewatability. That can be a big deal. So that part reduce the truck hauling, the storage, that can make a lot more sense. And we have the disinfection to make like a classic sludge if a state still allow us to use the sludge as a fertilizer. So again, so start to explore the co-benefits. So bring all the benefit together, help reduce the overall cost of this recovery technology. Well, the big challenge probably, and every time when I present things like this, I will get a question is, what about energy consumption? You get an electrochemical system which is energy intensive, which is true. That is true. So I have to admit, so the electrochemical process is energy intensive. we'll hope there's renewable energy, there's biogas, and more treatment plants start to use a solar panel, and hopefully the energy cost is bring down and make the whole process more cost competitive. And another thing is that one of the key reasons nowadays people start to slow down the sludge land application is those emerging contaminants. Can we have one of the co-benefit looking into the remove of these emerging contaminants? As I mentioned, there could be electrochemical oxidation. Because to remove a PFAS, you either use the adsorption that's very effective, or if you want to destroy it, probably advanced oxidation, still one of the very effective approach to be applied. Now, finally, I think the application needs need to be identified. Would they be the technology that universally applied, or should be identified to a certain niche, decentralized treatment? So that's really helped to accelerate the adaptation of the new technology, because sometimes they certain niche can afford more expensive technology compared to many other places. So really understand the application niche will really help with the technology development and adaptation. All right, so at the end, I would like to thank Dr. Zixuan Wang, who was my PhD student, really work on this topic and help to discover this improved dewatability. So he's currently a postdoc at the Illinois UIUC. And Mr. Darren Arnold was an undergraduate researcher, also involved in this research, and who's currently working for Navy, a nuclear office. And our collaborator at Bucknell University, Dr. Matt Higgins. So we really need someone who is an expert in the sludge and the dewatability. And without his part, we really have no understanding of what's going on. And finally, thank you very much for your time and patience. As So-Young introduced at the beginning, I'm the editor-in-chief of two journal, Water Environment Research, which is the academic journal of WEF, Water Environment Federation, and we focus on applied research, water and wastewater. And the other journal is the Journal of Hazardous Materials. If you have work about microplastic, PFAS, please consider us. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Hu. This was great. Really, really loved how much you dug into all the different things and considerations needed for electrochemical recovery. Yeah, so we do have a couple questions that have already rolled in, but feel free to continue to drop those into the Q&A box. First up, this is a great one and ties very much into what Great Lakes Renew is all about. Someone asks, do you think pilot testing for these technologies will depend on private sector investment or working with public wastewater treatment plants?
Well, my understanding it will be both, right? So basically, we look at the public utility. They're probably the end user of the technology. So we do
Mhm.
need the support from them, provide the testing side, additional support, and the private investment is really important because when you develop technology, money is always a key factor. So I would say we want the collaboration among all, and also don't forget academia, right? So we professors also try to develop new concept.
Okay, great. Um, And then we have a question about have you tested PFAS or any other like contaminants
Yeah.
in the electrochemically recovered phosphorus?
I see the question from Junhong. Hey, Junhong. So as I mentioned, PFAS is hot now, so we have to look into that. At this point, we have not. But as I mentioned, that we should try to explore the co-benefit at the same time, especially PFAS not become a big factor. So we should really look into that.
Hmm. And then, I mean, I know you touched on the heavy metals component as like a, side effect of the separation process. And we just talked about PFAS. Are there any other contaminants or wastewater constituents or water constituents that are of a concern or that you think is worth future investment and looking at?
Well, when you look at, I mean, a lot of times it really depends on the regulation. Right. So if you put a regulation, then people look into that, like PFAS or other emerging contaminants. There could be antibiotics. And then microplastic is another one, whether it's a big concern or not. So in general, if you look at the electrochemical system, it's electrochemical oxidation in the anode side. So
Mhm.
depend on how much you want to achieve, then how much electricity, what's the catalyst you want, what type of radical compounds you want to produce. That's going to bring additional challenges, additional cost, additional operation. But again, so that requires further evaluation whether the generated benefit worth the effort.
Mm, gotcha. Great. All right.
Yeah, I see the next question from Paige. Hey, Paige.
Yeah.
So, about scaling up the technology, I think without involving microorganisms, scaling up should be relatively straightforward because there are already full-scale electrochemical system. There's an ED system, there's other electro-osmosis system. So I wouldn't worry too much about scaling up. Of course, there's a challenge for this type of systems because we're treating even 1% solid, 2% solid is still different from completed water. So that can create challenge, clogging, fouling, probably not too much. We haven't really observed fouling, biofouling, because you have two different pH environment, really not good environment for microorganism, but scaling can be an issue as I show in some of the data. So overall scale up, I think there's a lot of experience with just pure electrochemical system scale up. This is not too much difference. But most the problem probably from operation side because of feedstock is different.
Gotcha. And then you just mentioned total solids, so the next
Mhm.
question kind of fits into that. Could you like just, I guess, clarify, what the total solids concentration was for this work and how that may compare to removing from solution versus the solids?
So the raw sample of this total solid, so that we sample the sludge from wastewater treatment plant. So that's the real sewage sludge, anaerobic digested sludge. So
Mhm.
we haven't really, I think some of my students probably I didn't really include that data. So we did test the total solids, but it's not much different from others. I can only say so not much different from the regular sludge you get from digester, but I don't have that data at my hand at this point. Yeah, so from that standpoint, it's not too much different. But we're not really looking at the electrocoagulation, which really you start to release the compound from electrode. So we try to use inert electrode. That's not very active. So
Gotcha. All right. Ooh, just got a whole slew of questions, so just skipping through them.
some sludge generates by which one? So chemical treatment, what if one can recover before? Yeah, well, I think this question is so let's treat the sludge before recover, minimize the sludge begin with. That would be great. But again, so think about what type of technology. So, um, as I said, we're really dealing with sludge out of the AD. At this point, we still think, at least I'm a big fan of AD. So I still think AD is very good technology to reduce the solid contents. So it's hard to be replaced by other technology at this point. If there's other technology you can treat the sludge before the recovery, that'd be great. But at this point, probably AD is still pretty good one. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then someone asked about scaling. I know you mentioned
Mhm.
the need for cleaning on some cadence and how you can see the need for cleaning based on the electricity consumption. How does that impact like the life expectancy of a system of the materials? And are there any other considerations in terms of like efficiency that scaling influences after cleaning?
Yes, there is a scaling, right? So actually, in one of the data figure, I showed that when you look at energy consumption, we use energy consumption as an indicator. If
Mhm.
energy consumption is okay, comparable to the fresh new cathode electrode, it's okay. Then you see a few bump up. So that's basically when you have the scaling, certainly going to reduce efficiency. That means to achieve similar performance, you have to apply more electricity.
Mhm.
That's related to the cost. Yes, there is a scaling.
Great. And then I'll just ask one final question, and then we have a quick closeout. How can people find you and learn more about your research? I mean, you mentioned your other work, but yeah, how can people like stay connected and follow what you're doing?
I have a website, so feel free to Google me, Jason He, Washio, so you can find the website. All our articles are there. If you cannot access any of our papers, feel free to email me, so I can certainly respond and share the paper with you. And I also would like to answer the last question. Work with electrocoagulation. I'm not, but one of my colleagues, Dr. Dan Jamar, is working on electrocoagulation. I see he's going to give a seminar here at the Third Coast probably in another month or so. So don't miss his talk. So he's expert on the electrocoagulation.
Great. Thank you so much again for a wonderful presentation. Very informative and very captive and engaged audience. So thank you also to everyone who attended today. Um, For those who are here and may know of someone who would be interested in watching and learning about this subject, we will be posting a recording of this video to our YouTube. If you are watching this on YouTube right now, this is very meta. Hello. And yeah, we do have two more seminars coming up in March and April. And then we'll be taking a brief hiatus for the summer. But catch us back the first Wednesday of March for Dr. Paul Westroff, who will be talking about water reuse and semiconductor wastewater management. And with that, thank you again, both Soryang and Jason, for your time. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Bye.